Hello and welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and today I'm joined by Michael Morgan. Michael is a 30-year law enforcement veteran, having served with the Atlanta Police Department and the Long Island Suffolk County Police Department. He retired in October of 2022 after an on-the-job injury. After that, experienced some mental health battles. He turned to plant-based medicines, in particular ayahuasca, to go through some kind of healing and relief. And although his mental health is an ongoing process for him, Michael's mission is now to be an outspoken advocate for the mental health of first responders and veterans, as well as focusing on suicide prevention in those communities. So Michael, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Erin. I am honored and humbled, and that's the smoothest intro I've ever received.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Doria, I'm sure I'll fuck something up later. So yeah, and if you're comfortable, I'll call you Mike, because I know that
Absolutely.
tend to go by that. So you have had like such an extensive, career in law enforcement. What sort of made you join? And I'm assuming at like a rather young age.
Yeah, so what happened was growing up, this is funny. My father was a fireman in the New York City Fire Department, and
Really?
he was actually a cop for 1 year, and it's called rolling over. So he rolled over to the fire department for his last 35. So he did 36 in total. And my father, it's pretty funny, vowed never to have his son or daughter take a civil service exam. He just wanted us to go to college, graduate, have a white collar job, make plenty of money, and not go through what he went through.
Yeah.
But I never had any aspirations of getting into law enforcement. So I graduated from Hofstra University on Long Island with an accounting degree in 1991. I started my job shortly thereafter, October of 91, with a firm in Manhattan. So first day on the job, it's supposed to be really exciting. You're embarking on this new career. You just spent 4 years in college.
Yeah.
First day of the rest of your life. So get in there, meet, and introduced to a lot of colleagues. And I'm given a task at about 11 a.m. During this task, I end up waking up. I fell asleep with my head in my hand. And I kind of looked to my right. The guy that was training me, who was a bit strange, wasn't paying attention. So I just got up from my seat, went over to another guy I met earlier. He seemed really cool. I'm like, "What's up, brother? You like this stuff?" He's like, "F no, I hate it." I'm like, there is no way I'm sitting in a cubicle for the next 30, 35 years of my life, making no difference to no one. No one but my close family and friends is going to know whether I lived or died. I'm like, I need to figure out what I want to do with my life. So just kind of went deep introspective, realized that it was law enforcement that I wanted to get into and make my career. At the time, I wanted to get applied to the FBI, but unfortunately, they were on a federal hiring freeze, which went on for like another 7, 8 years. So, yeah, it was a while. I guess the Cold War was over. The wall had come down. The feds were shrinking their manpower, and unfortunately, it just happened to be bad timing. So. But universe just sends you in different directions for a reason. So, bam, I just pivoted. It's amazing how it works out. I mean, never look at a closed door as though your dream was shuttered or whatever. You just kind of look to your left or your right, and there's something else staring you in the face. Yep. Everything happens for a reason. And I truly believe that. So I had met the brother of a good friend of mine. He had just moved down to Atlanta himself. He worked for Pan Am Airlines. They had gone bankrupt, and then Delta picked up his whole welding shop and moved everyone down to Atlanta. He loved it. Just bought a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, half-acre pool for $105,000. I'm like, bro, I am getting out of New York because that's what I wanted to do anyway. And I'm going to get some experience. I'm going to apply to Atlanta Police Department. And then when the feds start hiring again, I'll get hired with them. So that was it. Applied in November 92, was hired in August 93. I had to wait, went down in August 93, had to wait a couple of months for the next class to go in. It did in November, graduated in April, and then started my career in April 94.
Wow. And so what was like, I guess, Atlanta like, I guess, back then as opposed to growing up in New York? Was there any kind of like a culture shift or anything like that?
I mean, it's in the deep South, but Atlanta itself is a very cosmopolitan city. So, it's not like you're going into, you know, Redneckville where, I'm going to stick out like a sore thumb. Now, this accent does. I'm not going to say it doesn't. It was so funny moving down here and you hear people referring to you as a Yankee. Like, what?
Yeah.
Civil War was over quite a while ago. But, it is what it is. So, it was a great city. It was building up for the Olympics. The Olympics are going to be held in
Oh,
'96.
96.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a massive amount of infrastructure building. People were moving there. It was very young, so definitely liked it. On the police side, it was insanity. It was voted the most violent city in America for the 10 years I was there. I worked in Zone 3, which is the most violent part of Atlanta. And I call it an education for a middle class white boy from Long Island. It was insane. Just to show you how insane it was, my first night out of the academy, I'm working a midnight tour, which is 11 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
We start at 11 p.m. By 12 a.m., my FTO field training officer is driving me to a homicide scene. It was a couple of sectors over, but he wanted to expose me to as much as possible. And we get there. I look inside this car. There's a dead guy sitting behind the wheel, brain matter everywhere. And it's a crazy story. He was actually an Atlanta fire department captain who was suspended for sexual allegations of him being with younger girls. So
Okay.
while on suspension, he decides that he wants to get a prostitute that night. So he goes, picks up a prostitute who's 16 years old. Then he decides he wants to smoke crack with her. So he pulls up to the local dope boy on the corner selling his wares. And the dope boy looks in the car, and who does he see but his 16-year-old cousin? Takes his gun out, puts one on the guy's head. He's done.
Oh,
First hour.
that's
So it was a crazy story. I guess the allegations were confirmed in one shot there.
yes,
but
yes. A little bit of tribal justice there.
exactly. Starting to make light,
Um,
but we use morbid humor
oh, of course.
to cope with everything.
It's the half the fun of the job.
Absolutely.
And as well, like, I guess, having been a police officer for so long, and how you're saying, like, obviously Atlanta was like a crazy place to be a cop back then, but considering, I feel like, when I became a cop, I was obviously working with coppers who, were started back in the 90s, and there was a very different style of policing sort of back then compared to sort of like towards the end of your career, in terms of when you started out in Atlanta. What was that sort of juxtaposition like for you?
Yeah, it changed in leaps and bounds from the beginning of my career to the end of my career. I worked in a very violent place, and unfortunately, you had to be violent. You were tested daily. Um, you had to establish a reputation. We were one-man cars as well, so a lot of times you're getting on scenes. You're solo in a project, and if you're not ready to rock and roll, they will eat you alive. You're in the hood. They smell fear. They can see it in your eyes. I can tell myself when a man's scared, and if you show any weakness, they will pounce on you like predators.
Yeah.
Um, just an addendum to my first night. 4 hours later, my partner decides he needs to take a nap. We used to work 5 and 2s, 5 8-hour tours. So in addition to that, we would work extra jobs. We were definitely not well compensated. So most guys were working a minimum of 60 hours a week, and especially the midnight guys would be exhausted. So we pull into Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, which is where the Atlanta Braves played at the time, and he just reclines his seat, goes to sleep. I'm like on watch here. My head's on a swivel. Like, I can't believe this guy's sleeping. With that, dispatcher raises us and gives us a 50-4, which is a shooting and an ambulance en route. Before I could say his name, he inclines the seat, puts the car in gear, hits the gas, copies the call with the radio. I'm like, holy shit, this guy's Superman. It was unbelievable. He was snoring and did all that fast before I could even say his name. So
Yeah.
we go to the scene and found a second homicide victim in 5 hours. He was on his back in the street, got shot. It was a drug deal gone bad. And his eyes were wide open. There was a little bit of rain going on at the time, so he had like smoke kind of coming off his body. And every homicide scene I've ever been to, and probably even natural deaths, it always struck me as like, man, this guy was living his life a few minutes ago, and now he's gone. Like, that thought never left my mind in all the homicide scenes I've been to. And I can't even imagine. I can't even estimate how many I've been to.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I think as well, like, I always found it, and I sort of never, fortunately, was like involved in anything as serious as what you were. But I always found sort of something like I would almost kind of like ask permission to kind of be in there, or sort of, I always just felt like, there's a sense of like depersonalization that we get used to as police officers. And that is, part of desensitization and, compartmentalization. And sometimes we do that to survive, our jobs.
Absolutely.
But I think like, for me, it was always kind of like that respectful thing of like, whatever's happened, I'm here in the aftermath. I'm going to do my best to make it so that, you go in peace, or your family, or, something like that. I always found sort of just like a sense of like compassion in terms of like showing that level of respect. And it was all just like up in here. I didn't say anything out loud. It was all in my head. But I don't know. I think there was like, because dead people always like used to freak me out. Like,
oh, really?
well, because I was just like waiting for them to move. And that, so like, and like mannequins still freak me out because I waiting for them to move as well.
That's hilarious. Ma'am, he's not going to answer you. You may as well stop talking to him now.
I know, but that's one of my little quirky things.
We all have them. That's great.
And so, we will sort of delve into like the mental health like side of your career probably like a little bit later, but just in terms of like, it sounds like you did a really hard 10 years out in Atlanta. Like, where were you at sort of towards like the end of that 10-year period?
Like, I got transferred to the motorcycle squad about 5 years in, and I would say within those 5 years you're already burnt out. I mean, you're handling, I started off working 3 to 11 tours, and we were probably good for 20 to 30 calls a day. I went to a day watch probably 3 years in, and still we would handle like 15 to 20 calls. So it was nonstop.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was. It was nonstop. There was never any let up. It was, again, it was so violent. And, mentally it takes its toll on you. Whether or not you think it does, you block it out, you think you're doing good, but seeing all these things and having it like kind of burn into your psyche, collectively, it's not going to start off affecting you that way, it didn't me, but eventually it reaches a saturation point.
Yeah, it's a like gradual sort of frogging the pot like scenario.
That's what it is. And I tell people all the time, like, I at some point years later looked in the mirror and I'm like, man, who is this guy? You don't realize this changes you're making, and we'll discuss it later, but you callous up because you can't absorb all this pain that everyone else is experiencing. And additionally, when you get to scenes, you have to stay hyper focused. So you don't even think of these people as human beings. You can't think of this as someone's father or mother or son, because then you start thinking of all these other extraneous thoughts, which are only going to take you off of your mission and make you unfocused. So you're like a machine. And, it's sad but true, but that's the way you have to be.
Yes, absolutely. And regardless of whether, I think, maybe the general public just don't understand that. And sometimes, you would see like the criticism online, a lot of, the way that we interact with people. But it's like, do you want us to be nice, or do you want us to be fucking good at our job?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
Sometimes you can't have both. Sometimes you can, and that's okay. But sometimes you cannot have both.
Yeah. It's tough.
And so, like, after 10 years, and you're saying, you're probably like a little bit burnt out, regardless of whether you realize it or not, what prompted the move from Atlanta sort of back towards Long Island?
It was my hometown. My family was still located in New York, all my lifetime friends. It was definitely a higher quality of life with the Suffolk County job. The salary was much higher. Just collectively, I guess a lot of things were bringing me back. The family had a lot to do with it. And, I just thought I would live a better life going back up north for that job.
Yeah, fair enough. And so was it 2003 that you made that
Yes.
move?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, October 2003.
Was that, I know different places do it differently. Was that considered like a lateral transfer, or did you have to start from square one again?
Yeah, I had to start from square one, so I had to go through the academy again at 35, which wasn't as easy as 25. But yeah, I guess it wasn't that difficult. The only problem was I had massive shin splints my first go around, and every time I would run, they would kind of just act up quickly. So I wasn't doing that much running prior to the academy, just trying to make it. And then the academy they started kicking up again. So excuse me, those things are miserable. But other than that, it wasn't a bad academy. You're trying to learn as much as you can in the second academy, and it's just weird now you're going through it as a 35-year-old and you're with 21-year-olds who never did this before. They're all like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you're like this grizzled veteran, like, relax.
Yeah. Perspective is definitely different, and I think
Exactly.
because I was one of those bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kids
Oh, yeah.
in the academy, and it's you kind of get so pulled into like the academy life, and it's it's like make or break and all that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, we had like a 20-year army veteran in our squad who was like in his 40s, and he was just like very fucking chill dude, and he was just like, you'll be right, kid. Like,
Oh, yeah. You see these young guys and girls who are getting intimidated by you screaming and stuff. Like, just relax. It's a game. By the end of this academy, we're going to be drinking with these guys. Just, don't attract attention. Don't be up here. Don't be down there. Just be in the middle. It's like a bell curve. You'll be fine.
Absolutely.
It's a game.
Yeah, the academy game. And then I think one of the things you also sort of realize is like they teach you how to do it in the academy, and then you learn how to do it in the real world. And
exactly.
those things are always a little bit different.
Oh, yeah, just a little bit. The grizzled vets will be like, forget everything you learn in the academy. This is how we do it.
Yeah, basically. This is bullshit.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like talk to me. So then, even though you were technically starting from square one in this new police department, was there like obviously like the recognition of your prior service like amongst the members, and did that sort of translate to you like either getting promoted or attaining different positions in like a more rapid rate than like would have normally?
Not really. I mean, I think I got a little more respect from my coworkers. I wasn't a rookie. I mean, truth be told, it's not bragging. It just happened to be the situation I was in. I had more experience than pretty much anyone in my precinct. Guys who 30 years on didn't see the stuff that I saw in my first 10 years.
Of course.
That being said, I was humble as could be. Mouth was shut, ears were wide open. I just tactically, most of those guys just had no experience like I had, and it's nothing special about me. I was just in that environment, and it dictated. It was a very violent environment. It dictated that you learn quickly and become proficient, or else it's not going to go well for you.
Yeah, kind of have to sink or swim.
Yeah, exactly.
And sort of I understand from our like offline conversations, you sort of had some challenging times sort of around like 2010 period. That would have been when you were at Suffolk County.
Yes. So during that time, I was married. This was my first marriage, and things were not going well. She had moved up from Atlanta to be with me, but she wasn't getting along with my family. My family was not getting along with her. Truth be told, my family should have been a lot more gracious towards her than they were, but they were not. So I was trying to make everyone happy. No one was happy. I was miserable. And I started taking, I was always prescribed, well, not always, but I had serious back problems in most of my adult life. So I was prescribed this medicine called tramadol. And I'd always taken it as prescribed. But as all this stuff is going, all this drama is happening, I'm realizing now that this is kind of dulling the pain of everything that's going on. And it was funny. I remember I took a little more than I should have for a month, and I ran out. And then I said to myself, do I want this next month to go smoothly, or do I want to kind of get back to that pain and stuff? And I placed another order. At the time, you could order online. So I'd have doctor prescribe it. And the more I took, I would order it online. And it just it's funny too, because I'm anti-drug. I've never done another drug in my life. I've always been an athlete, staunchly anti-drug. And, I notice now that I'm taking these things, I became addicted to them. Even though you could get it online, you would kind of justify it. But in my head, I also knew that I was addicted to them. And, it became a bad habit to where I was taking sometimes 50 a day, your tolerance just builds up, so you need more and more and more and more. And I had 8 seizures over a 3-year period using this medicine, and one of which occurred on a January day. I remember I got something out of one of my shelves. I was walking towards my countertop, and that's the last thing I remember. Next thing I remember, I don't know how much time elapsed. I'm taking my ex-wife's clothes out of our closet, walk-in closet. I'm putting them on the bed. So my left side of my face is killing me. And I have no idea what happened. I'm just kind of coming out of this fog. And I walk in the bathroom. And what happened was, when I was downstairs in the kitchen, I must have seized and collapsed and fell on the left side of my face on the granite countertop. And my eye was almost closed. My whole face was starting to black and blue and swell up. And luckily, my ex-wife was in Europe on business at the time. So she was going to be away for like, I don't know, 10 days. And there was not many vacation pics in January, so I was able to call up work and just take vacation 5 straight days. So I had 10 days. I just hid from everyone, and that still didn't make me stop. I knew I could have died. My Rottweiler was actually right under that countertop. Thank God I didn't hurt her or kill her. That would have destroyed me. But still didn't stop. And I guess my lowest point when I hit rock bottom was Sunday night. Had a seizure. My wife was there. She went, got the neighbors. They came back. I excused myself, asked to speak to my wife. I looked at her and I'm like, I can't stop this. I need help. And it was at that point I realized I needed to go to rehab. I was trying to stop the usage, so I would wean myself down about 3 or 4 a day, but then the tolerance would go down, so the feeling would amp up again. And it was just a vicious cycle. So ended up going to rehab. It was supposed to be initially an outpatient, but I was taking such a high quantity of pills, they wanted to wean me off slowly. So I went in for 12 days. And it was funny because Blue Cross, the medical insurance company, never heard of anyone getting addicted to this particular medicine, which I can't believe. It's synthetic codeine. That being said, they had like a high level phone call with, originally I was going to outpatient. That's what I wanted to do. So it was my ex-wife's uncle, who's also in the medical field. He was friends with this lady who owned the outpatient. Went there, had a conference with her, and then she said, I think it's probably best if you go inpatient. So she ends up having like this, I think it was like 4 or 5 high echelon Blue Cross executives on this phone call they had. And initially they were declining to pay. And she's like, they're declining right now. I think they'll come around. I'm like, listen, tell them I'm taking up to 50 a day, 8 seizures. I'm ruining my life. So if they want any more proof. And that was it. They put me in rehab. And I remember the first night I'm kind of looking around and I'm crying to myself. And I'm like, how did I get here? I've tried to live this honorable life. And one thing I illustrate to people is if it can happen to me, who's Mr. Anti-Drug, it can happen to anyone. I'm not saying that out of ego, but it can happen to anyone. And I just couldn't believe I was in that space I was in. So ended up doing what I had to do, got myself right, got out of there, and that it would never happen again, which, it'll never happen again.
Yeah. I mean,
But
that would have been a really challenging time for you, but you obviously recognized it and went and got the right kind of help that you needed.
yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to raise your hand and ask for help. No one is coming to throw you over the shoulder and take you and get help. Once you ask for it, it's there. And I'm glad I've gone through it now. I've forgiven myself. It's something I did. It's not me. We make mistakes. There's no perfect being that I've ever met. We're all imperfect. And the beauty of it is that now when I speak to vets and first responders with substance abuse issues, I can literally say, brother, I know exactly what you're going through with no BS. Like I've been there myself.
Yeah.
So,
that level of empathy and insight and understanding, I think, is incredibly crucial for this population too, because it's really hard to penetrate because we're suspicious of outsiders and it's like, you have no fucking idea, mate. And you're like, well, actually, I kind of do. So
yeah. I actually just got a DM 3 days ago from a vet and in the Midwest, and he wrote exactly what was going on with him. And I laughed, not because it was funny. I showed it to my wife and I said, this is exactly what I would have written had I been writing to him. Like everything that this guy went through, started off with his father, very stern father. He thought his middle name was asshole, and just everything he was detailing, all these calls. because he was a police officer in addition to being a vet. I'm like, this is a mirror image of my life story. It was crazy. So we played telephone tag, but hopefully get on the phone with him today and help him out. But it's amazing. The stories are essentially the same. You know, the causation factors of the trauma and PTSD that we suffered may be different, but trauma is trauma. It doesn't matter how you suffered it. It's going to manifest itself in the same ways, and your body is going to physically react to it in the same ways. You know, we all think we're special, but we're just human beings, and there's only so many ways that we could suffer these traumas and adapt or not to them.
Exactly. And like you were saying, you know, you were using it as a form of pain relief, but, you know, that slowly, incrementally developed into like a maladaptive coping mechanism, which we all do. Like, and especially coppers, we drink, and you just happen to slip into that medicated side of it. But you know, there's a reason it has like addictive properties, because it's strong. It's meant to be erasing your pain.
Yep.
And your body and, you know, your physiology responds in a particular way. And there's also certain, you know, properties that can go against us. Like you can have like a biological predisposition to, you know, fall into that pattern of addiction more than other people. So sometimes we aren't even in control of all of the factors. And I think that's what, you know, people fail to realize as well. And it's not just like with like addiction in terms of like the trauma that we experience on the job. We don't all start our careers at the same trauma point. Someone can have had this like completely blissful childhood and then walk into something terrible, like your bloody first shift, you know, at Atlanta, and it just like puts them in a spin. Or they could cope with it because they haven't really experienced much else. And then on the flip side, you can have experienced a ton of trauma and it can send you for a spin, or you kind of go, nah, this ain't that bad, and sort of soldier on. So like our cups are at different levels, and it's like you're saying, you know, it's really not about comparing ourselves, but there are so many of us out there who have gone through, like you're saying, what you've gone through, and who just want to be there to offer help. So it's
absolutely
so beneficial.
And at that point that you said we all bring traumas into it, it's funny. One thing I never realized over my 30 years, it's only been since I've come into this space that I am in now, and now going back and speaking to guys, kind of retroactively, is that I found that most guys in these warrior cultures did not have good relationships with their father growing up. Mine was extremely stern, and I find it's where the fire kind of started within for us. Now, I don't know if it's because of them or in spite of them that we become what we become, but it's not normal to do the stuff we do and, you know, run towards troubles. Everyone else is running away from it. And to be honest with you, some of us love it. I mean, I loved it. There was no other experience I've had, no adrenaline rush than chasing another man, you know, especially an evil man. I absolutely, with every fiber of my soul, I loved it. And I say that because, you know, I still, as we'll talk about, develop PTSD, even though I loved like every fiber of my soul what I was doing. So I find, you know, and if anyone's listening to this, guys, most of us had these tough upbringings from our dads. You know, some guys know you can't make a generalization about everyone, but the overwhelming majority of gentlemen that I talk to, I think girls are a little bit different in this respect, but the guys, it was just a tough upbringing for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, you can speak to that. And like you're saying, yeah, like I grew up with like an absent father. So it, because he passed away when I was little. So it's,
sorry to hear that.
It's all good, a long time ago now. But it's that thing, yeah, like whether it's the absence, whether it's a fractured relationship, I think it affects us all very, very differently. And those dynamics do come into play because it affects our, you know, development throughout our formative years.
Yeah, so shapes your psyche. Absolutely.
Yeah, so everything definitely plays its role. And so over like the 20 years that you spent in Suffolk County, were you primarily like uniform, patrol, or what sort of other roles?
Yeah. I was on patrol most of my time. At one point, I'd actually started the track to become a detective. So it was, they call it COPE. So it's actually community oriented policing enforcement. You're still uniformed. So you're not answering calls anymore. You're just handling, you'll get quality of life offenses that you need to deal with, or maybe you could spend more time because you're not receiving calls on drug activity if you want to run drugs. But truth be told, there was a couple of guys, we call the detective squads. So there were a couple of guys in the squads that I didn't really, no one really cared for. And my worst nightmare, because I am not a guy who can hide emotion, what I'm feeling is you're going to see it on my face. I could not sit in a detective squad with someone I couldn't stand for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And there were, a couple of guys that I couldn't work with. So I'm like, listen, what am I going to do? I'm going into this position now. Number one, I don't like being inside. And, predominant amount of time, that's what you're doing, conducting kind of your investigations once you get back to the office, from the office.
Yeah.
And two, man, I love being on patrol because I can do what I want, go where I want, be with whom I want, whereas I can't control that once I go to a squad. So I literally asked my sergeant to go back to uniform patrol. He's like, really? He's like, dude, you can make detective pretty quick. I had a lot of time on it at the time. And I'm like, Sergeant, I don't want to. Be honest with you, man. I love being on the street, and it was always the dynamic I wanted. The only thing I would have liked was canine, but it just didn't present itself. I love dogs.
Yeah. Yes, you do. Yeah, and look, I obviously went down that detective path, and yeah, I can speak to it. Like sitting in an office with someone you don't particularly like for extended periods of time, it's challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not good putting on a face. Let's put it that way. I'm pretty genuine, and my mouth's got me into a lot of trouble.
You're not alone there. That's all right.
Yeah.
And so towards like the end of your career, I know sort of in I think it was like July 2018, you had sort of quite a harrowing call that you were first on scene for. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, this one's tough, and it'll come into play later when I'm talking about my whole kind of transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a call of a 2-year-old found floating in a pool. So, you go balls to the walls. I remember doing like 120 on Long Island Expressway Service Road getting there.
Yeah.
And it was me and a guy named Billy Steele, who was a volunteer fireman and a Nassau County police officer as well. They had joined us in Suffolk County. Long Island's comprised of Nassau and Suffolk. So, Billy's great. Was very happy to have someone with me, especially Billy. And we got back there. Someone handed us the baby in the backyard. Billy started doing CPR on the baby. I think he gave me the baby. I think we exchanged, and I continued and gave back to Billy.
Yeah.
So the baby was breathing. Ambulance rolled up. We threw the baby in with the paramedics, and the parents took off. So, it was just a horrible experience. But the next 3 hours were, I can't even describe them. So I had to wait for detectives and crime scene to come out because they have to do an investigation, make sure, there was no negligence or anything like that. And what happened was, so the grandparents now are the sole occupants of the house when I'm there for those 3 hours. And the grandparents were in charge. They had a family get together of watching the baby. So what happened was all the kids had gone inside and they were playing in the basement. No one knew the baby knew how to get to this access door, the small access door in the basement. And she did. It's amazing what these kids figure out. And everyone else, once the kids went in the basement, went back inside. So all the adults are in the kitchen upstairs. Baby gets out in the pool, and no one knows how long the baby was there. One of the grandparents came out, sort of floating, so they snatched her up. But for those 3 hours, I had to listen to the most visceral cries and screams. It still gets me from these poor grandparents. I have never experienced this feeling in my life. I was crawling out of my skin, and it's thank God it's nothing that's ever been duplicated again. But I, at one point, started welling up. I was there probably an hour and a half into it, and I was about to start crying. So I went to go behind the pool, and it would have been the best thing I could have done, to be honest with you, just lose it. And I said to myself, fucking pussy, you can't cry. These people can't see you cry. If they see you cry, they're going to lose it even more. Plus, your coworkers here, they can't see you cry, showing emotion is weakness. And, had I done so, gone behind that pole, I think it would have been the absolute best thing, most cathartic thing I could have done at the time. But turned around, walked right back towards the house, and I just continued my duties. The crazy thing about that was this was towards the end of the night. Had it been earlier in the day, once this call was over, I would have been back in service, like 2:20, get to the next call, whatever that call may be. With no counseling, no, nothing really, to be honest with you. I'll give the department this. They provided the chaplain to speak to me the next day. And if anyone from the department's watching this, you guys need to do more for the officers, not for me, but in the future, guys need more than that. Chaplain was great.
CISM type of.
They have peer counseling and stuff like that. There are definitely a few more mechanisms that these guys are able to access. But the department needs to be more proactive because, you ask us like, nah, we're cool. But after seeing that, you're not cool.
No.
And I remember talking to the chaplain the next day, and I said, Father, I don't understand. The baby was dead. Why would God let us resuscitate her? Because at the time it was still touch and go. Yeah. We knew she had an hypoxic brain injury, so no matter what, even if she'd survived, she was probably going to be bedridden. And he's like, Mike, it's a good question. He goes, think about it this way. If she's going to pass, at least you're giving the family time to grieve and, spend time with her. I said, I understand that, but I don't understand why God would let her live in that condition. And he's like, to be honest with you, that's God's plan. He's like, it's really nothing you can question. I'm like, yeah, I understand that, but I am. And one of the worst parts about that was I get a notification about a month or two later to receive an award for this. And I'm reading it. I'm like, I don't want a fucking award for this. And it still gets me like, it's like guilt. I thought it was disrespectful to turn it down, but because it wasn't just me, it was paramedics involved, it was a bunch of other people. But I'm like, why am I getting an award for this? And I remember that night going there. I just started dating my current wife. She was real proud of me. Everyone's coming up giving me these accolades. And inside, I'm like dying. I'm like, I don't want to be here, man. This is no award that I want. And, it's went through, got the award. But it's crazy, the dynamic of the feelings that were going on inside me. I felt guilty for resuscitating her, to be honest with you. Then I felt guilty for having that guilt because it wasn't mine to have. She wasn't my baby. And the family was so appreciative that we had brought her back. I mean, these guys, the fire department became really close to the family. To be honest with you, I couldn't. I couldn't see the baby. I had two crackheads that lived across the street. And every time that call came up, I was like cursing because I knew the family would see me there and they would come out. And I always made excuses as to, why I couldn't go in the house to see the baby. And I went in one time and she couldn't make eye contact or anything like that. 24-hour nurse, and they're hugging me and kissing me and like crying and thanking me, and it was like tearing me apart. Now I'm like, I can't have these feelings of guilt. Like these people so appreciate they have their baby, no matter what condition she's in. And again, it was I can't describe the feelings. Like I'm feeling guilty about all the other guilt, and now I'm feeling guilty about the fact that they love the fact she's there. But I left that house that day. I'm like, I can never do that again. And every time I went in, I would make an excuse. And it was funny because after I healed from PTSD, and I still probably will do it, I want to write a letter to them, kind of explaining everything I went through. And like the fact that they were so appreciative and so loving towards their baby and were so thankful to have her in any condition, like still blows me away to this day. Like the love they have for their child is so pure and beautiful that I want to write them a letter and tell them that.
Yeah.
And I probably will.
I think that sounds like it would be very sort of healing and cathartic for you to express everything you just shared, and thank you for sharing it, because I can't imagine it's easy for you in the slightest.
Yeah, that one's still hard from I've definitely healed from it. It doesn't have the emotional charge that it did, but it's still got a highly emotional charge.
Yeah, and I think anyone watching or listening can obviously see how much it impacted you, but we as first responders, not all in that way, but we all have those jobs that stay with us, and I think, one thing you always hear about with jobs like that, it's the ones that kind of come back and do haunt us. It's the visceral smells and sounds, and like you're saying, the location that you had to go back and keep visiting. Like, that's uniquely challenging.
Yeah, it was tough. I tell people I've been shot at. I'd rather have been shot at again. I've been in riots. I'd rather be in riots than do that. It's easy for me anyway I've always trained to be in the violence.
Yeah.
That's easy. The emotion is not, especially someone else's pain like that. And, it was just a devastating call. So, but they're thankful they have their baby. And,
Yeah.
you know, that's really all that should be important.
Yeah, no, 100%. And thank you for sharing that. And I really hope that, either you get the opportunity to write, communicate with them, or, even send them this, because they can, anyone, and I, I'm a parent, and to see a stranger impacted in the way that you are by their little girl, and the role that, you played, and all of the emotions that, you have wrestled with, it definitely would mean a lot to them, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I need to do that, to be honest with you, for both of us, myself, and I think it'd be good for them.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I know that's a tough one.
Sure.
And so obviously that was a couple of years prior to you sort of, getting towards the end of your career. How were you in, I guess, maybe like the aftermath of that? Not to pull you back to it, but in terms of, you are 28 years on, 10 at a really heavy police department, and I understand that Suffolk County was a different level of policing, but like you're saying, there's still the same kind of jobs, the same kind of critical incidents and trauma exposure and all that kind of thing. How, where were you sort of towards like that part of your career?
I mean, I think I was in a pretty decent headspace. I mean, that call we just spoke about, I buried deeply. We call it compartmentalizing. And I think that's one of the worst words that we use. It really needs to come out of our vernacular, because it really sounds like this fancy, precise psychological term where we put this stuff in a box and we lock it, and we lock this box and we just place it neatly in this area that's never going to be accessed again. When in fact, we bury it. That's all we're burying stuff. And you're going to bury until you reach a saturation point,
No more.
and then all of that stuff is coming out, usually in unhealthy ways.
Yeah.
At that point, it hadn't happened to me, so mentally, I was, in a pretty good headspace. Like I said, that one got buried. I try not to think about it at all. Um, and that's not good to we're human beings, and we're supposed to feel. And if you become so callous that you're not feeling anything, I remember when I was getting married to my wife. We got married at 21, and we wrote our vows, and I literally wrote, "I thought I was a broken man who could feel nothing until I fell in love with you." Um, my heart was empty. Like, I felt nothing, and I thought there's no way it could be resurrected. And that's no drama. It's not like I just would literally look in the mirror sometimes and be like, "Man, I don't feel anything." You just callous up so much, and it ventures into every portion of your life.
Yeah.
Because if something does hurt you, bother you, bam, you bury that one too.
Yeah.
And you just go on. And you just become a professional. I tell people I was the best at compartmentalizing until I wasn't. You know, that day when it all came up.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people would very much understand that description, because I don't think it's overly unique, unfortunately, and like you're
Yeah.
saying, leads to the maladaptive coping strategies, and it all can easily end in tears.
Oh yeah, absolutely destructive.
Um, and not for nothing, but the way that we process, or like the way that we heal from things, is processing them.
Hmm.
So when we bury it, when we compartmentalize, when we disassociate, all of the things, like, then it's stuck. It's actually just stuck inside us, and it's stuck in the wrong part of our brain, and the trauma resides in our body, and until we do process it and acknowledge it, as painful as that is,
Yeah,
that's when the process of healing actually begins.
exactly. I remember another call we had. So my partner, different, we were not in the same car, but we were adjoining sectors.
Yep.
So we're together one day and he gets a call to make a telephone call to dispatch. So dispatch gives him a phone number of a detective in Myrtle Beach Police Department because he's got to make a death notification. So he calls up. It's detective in Myrtle Beach calling about a resident of Dix Hills is where we worked. This kid was on spring break and apparently went to jump from one balcony to another at a hotel, fell to his death.
Jesus.
So now we have to go to the family and deliver this wonderful news. So, I just look at him, once you get that call, you're like, just ruins your day. So I just gave him a little tap. I'm like, let's go do it, brother. So we're rolling up to the house. The father is leaving the house as we're rolling up. He sees us and just falls to the ground, goes prostrate on the ground, and just punching the ground with his fist, crying, screaming. Apparently, he had an inkling that something was wrong with the son, but until we showed up, had no idea. So we get him up, we tell him what happened. He is losing it, and we go inside. He screams to the mother and daughter. They come downstairs. You can imagine how that went. And we were going to stay with them as long as we had to. We were there probably an hour and a half, something like that. But after we left, like, I don't think he and I said a word about it. It's the weirdest dynamic. And you know it yourself, like, you go to these calls and we don't stop shooting the shit, talking smack to each other, blah, 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 blah. But you get the calls like this and it's like silence. It's the weirdest dynamic. And then for the rest of the day, he and I sitting there, we probably took a meal after that and we're together the rest of the day, but not saying a word. Just, you kind of bury it. You're not talking about it to each other typically, and you just try to get over it as quickly as possible. And you're not processing it, you're just burying it. And it's devastating. You're going through this family's most private moment, and it's devastating to them. And the last thing you want to do is be there. You want to be elsewhere, anywhere else in the world but there. But you're also trying to treat them like you would want your family to be treated if police officers are coming to deliver that news as well. So you're staying there as long as possible. You have a mom brokenhearted hugging you, crying, and again, you're trying your hardest not to lose it. Just for strength for them, and again, you don't want to show weakness.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it is this weird role that we, especially as police officers, because of the duties that we do, like this weird role that we can play where it's like we're not just necessarily showing up on people's worst days, because we do that too, but sometimes the knowledge that we have is inflicting the pain of their worst day, and that is obviously not a nice thing to be involved in. But it always, like, when I was doing it as a police officer during my time, it would always make me go back and think about the way that my mum spoke about the police officers who came and notified us when my dad passed away. And she would not be able to tell you what they looked like, what their names were, anything like that. But she just always, it was like two men, and she just always talked about like their kindness and that they like they handled it very well. And they had to tell her husband was dead. My dad's mum was also there, so they had to tell her. And I was maybe 2.5, and my brother had just turned 5.
Wow.
So I look at that from like the policing side, and you go, fuck, that is not a great, situation to walk into in the slightest. But she just was always so adamant about the fact, she was like, they were just so lovely. They just, and obviously, shocks involved and all that kind of thing. And it was just always something in the back of my mind that I always kept, that it was like, I don't want them to remember my name, my face, anything about it other than it was a not a comforting interaction, but it was handled in the best way that.
Yeah, no, you're just graceful to them, and it's a lifelong. Yeah, it's a lifelong memory. And I remember being on a couple of death notifications in Atlanta with homicide, and they weren't graceful. And I'm, number one, embarrassed. Number two, I'm like, how would you like it? Thinking to myself, how would you like that news to be delivered to your family the way you just delivered it to them? I understand that death notifications become a little commonplace, but still, you're delivering a death notification. That's, it may be commonplace to you as a homicide detective, but it's not commonplace to whoever you're delivering it to.
Yeah,
And it needs to be delivered with grace and compassion, even if you're talking about a piece of shit.
absolutely. Because even a piece of shit has a mum,
Yep.
and a dad or a brother or sister or whoever, or even a wife and a
Yeah.
child, a husband, all of the things. So
Yeah. They're
it's
loved by people.
yeah, yeah, and it's easy for us to get complacent and hardened and cynical, and those
Yeah.
remembering
Get
those little bits
jaded.
and pieces are important.
Yep.
um
Humanity.
no, 100%. And so was it September 2020, I believe, that you were like involved, or you got injured on the job, and that sort of made it so you kind of couldn't perform your duties from there
Yep.
on.
September 22nd. Myself and a rookie were helping self-professed. She called it in as she was 450, but she was nothing less than a sandwich shy of 500, if not more. So we had to help her up the stairs. She had the biggest edemas on her legs I've ever seen. And I don't know how I got in the back, but I got in the back. And we're helping her up the stairs. I had to literally lift her right leg every step. So we crest the stair. I put her right leg on the top step, and all of a sudden I see it sliding back. So I just bent down and just kind of blasted her up the stairs. And when I did, I herniated 4 discs.
Oof.
And yeah, that was not fun. So I ended up I was out of work. We tried conservative treatments. They didn't work. I ended up getting a back surgery in April of 21. It's called a laminectomy, discectomy, same thing. My neurosurgeon told me it was going to take care of some problems, but not others. And he told me I'd probably be looking at a spinal fusion down the line. We were going to hope to delay that as much as possible.
Yeah.
So I went back to work the following October of 21. I really couldn't sit at a desk. It just was too painful. So I went and told my CO. I was there for 3 days. I'm like, I think I'm going to have to get this fusion. Went out, got that 6 months later. And they essentially medically retired me. I was 54 years old with a spinal fusion. They weren't putting me on the street. So got the retirement in October of 22. So that was 2 years now. Now this is 2 years of not being able to work, not being able to volunteer, not being able to go to the gym, not being able to do anything. They follow you. The videotape you getting into the
Because
car. If
you're
you get it,
on work
yeah,
cover. Yeah.
yep. Now I have confirmed injuries, MRIs, surgeries. It's not like I'm faking this thing. It's not like I'm telling you I have tinnitus, like ringing in my ears or anything like that.
Yeah.
But they still do what they do. So I actually had asked them. The Guide Dog Foundation of America was 2 miles from my house. I asked them, "Can I volunteer there?" Nope, can't do anything. So I literally had no purpose. I'm a purpose-driven individual. I had none. Built a gym in my basement, so I was able to work out at least. But it's this time now I'm starting to get these feelings kind of coming up. I'm not feeling myself.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit of depression, anger is popping up. Um, I now have to go. So I get retired in October 22. I have to go through another year of a workers' comp case. Can't work, can't volunteer. Same rules apply. So now it's just 3 years.
Yeah.
So I'm not feeling myself. I'd wake up some days, be in a good mood. I'd get a thought coming in my head, put me in a bad mood the rest of the day.
Yeah.
My wife's the best. I love my wife. I would say like a crossword to her. I'd be like, "What are you doing, man?
Mm.
I mean, like, what are you, a dick?" And I just couldn't control myself in some respects.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I was doing anything crazy, no physical violence or anything like
Yeah.
that. Just a crossword here and there, but not something I wanted to be doing. And I'm trying to process these things, but I'm not really sure what the origination is. And I'm not really giving enough credence to the fact that I'm now off a job that I was on for 30 years. I'm no longer this thing that I was for 30 years. I no longer have this camaraderie and brotherhood that I had for 30 years. And that was the part of the job that I loved. It's all gone. I didn't give that serious enough thought. So I remember
It's
this is
grief.
probably
It's all grief.
yeah, it is grief essentially. And I'd heard about other guys dealing with it, but I was like, I thought I was at peace with retiring, even though it wasn't really my doing. Um, and I thought I escaped unscathed, to be honest with you. And in my mind, maybe PTSD crossed my mind a couple times, but frankly, I was like, that's for the weak, man. It's an excuse, PTSD. And I always thought there were several ways to get it. There's so many ways to get it, actually. And I always thought it was something where I had to see, like, dead workmates or, I was shot or something happened to me. It really was nothing after I tell the story that happened to me that was bad. It was being in the midst of everyone else's pain.
Yeah.
When I look back at all the stuff that hurt me, it was dealing with their pain and being in the midst of their destruction.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, I mistakenly thought that because it didn't happen to me specifically, that I couldn't have PTSD. So I guess this is going now 22, 23. So probably about a year and a half ago, I'm watching a Sean Ryan podcast. He's got a very popular podcast on YouTube. He's a former Navy SEAL, former CIA contractor, and he's interviewing a guy named Eddie Penny, who's also a former Navy SEAL, Team 6 guy, which is like their upper echelon. And Eddie is recounting a story of Extortion 17. And that's when a Chinook went down. In addition to all the flight personnel aboard, 17 SEALs were killed, one of which being his best friend. And Eddie's recounting the story, and he's visibly upset, rightly so. And I don't know what it was about him telling the story. I don't know if it kind of told me that it was okay to get emotional, but I thought about that 2-year-old baby in the pool. It popped in my head, and I started crying like a baby. And what's amazing, most amazing to me to this day, is my first reaction was to look in the house to make sure that my wife had not come home from food shopping because I was embarrassed to be crying, showing emotion. And my wife's, first of all, life coach. She's into this higher consciousness. She's the type of woman, if I cry, she'd be like, let yourself cry more. She would never look at me with scorn or anything like that. But yet that was my first reaction.
Yeah.
And as I'm going through it, I kind of like the snap of a finger, realized like, I think I have PTSD. And now all these other calls started popping up that I buried. I'm like, holy shit. And in watching him and others on Sean Ryan, all these guys are talking about coming back from war, broken men, substance abuse issues, rage issues, depression issues, TBIs, and they're talking about using these plant-based medicines to heal. So that's the first time I became aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't think that it was applicable to me, but as I'm watching Eddie's video this particular time, I realized I'm like, I need help. And I didn't think traditional therapy or counseling was going to do it for me. I don't think I was going to talk to a man or woman behind a desk who's never seen anything. I'm going to tell them what I've been through, what I've done, what I've seen, and they're going to be able to help me. Just didn't appeal to me as a method that was going to be successful. And then I really started thinking about these plant-based medicines, and I was planning a trip to Peru because I said to myself, I have to try it. I told my wife, and she was like, okay, so we'll go to Peru. And then as we're moving to Florida last December, she's doing some research, and she found a place called Soul Quest Ayahuasca Church in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. We had planned our ayahuasca journey this past March, and it was like the most incredible thing I've ever experienced in my life.
Wow. And I mean, one thing that you sort of mentioned as well, like I think it's getting out there a little bit more now, but the thing of so many people associate PTSD with soldiers and, rape victims and natural disasters and stuff like that. And it really is this, not like misinformation, but I guess like a lack of knowledge and information about how we as first responders are, that constant exposure, like you're saying, to other people's tragedy and trauma and emotions, and it's always going to take an effect, and so I think it's I'm glad you were able to sort of slowly recognize it about yourself, instead of it spiraling off into a challenging place for you. And so, and again, like, realizing that you're kind of like, okay, therapy helps people, traditional medication, is great for some people, but you obviously know yourself well enough to go, it's not really what I'm seeking. And then obviously discovering, these plant-based options, it kind of spoke to you a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, It's
Yeah.
the second time in my life, really, I was raising my hand saying I need help. The first was the painkiller addiction, and
Yeah.
here again, I'm like, I need help. And
Yeah.
we have to, you have to put that ego aside, especially men. If there's help out there, there's no one is going through this life unscathed with various traumas, and there is no shame and saying you need help.
Mm-hmm.
It could just be something as easy as going to traditional counseling and maybe have a little hump you need to get over, or it could be something devastating. But additionally, I tell guys and girls, life is about perspective.
Yeah.
And one thing that I really harp on is do not make yourself a victim, especially if you're a warrior. Number one, your mind's not going to be able to reconcile. If you're a warrior, your mind cannot reconcile the fact that you're going to make yourself a victim.
Yeah.
So instead of the woe is me, I only have bad luck, why is this happening to me? Fucking turn that around.
Yeah.
Total 180, empower yourself. Thank the universe for every single thing that it puts you through. I mean, everything. It can be the most devastating pain, death of a loved one, relationship, whatever it is. You're getting tested for a reason, but you have to feel the pain. You can't dull it. You have to go through it. You have to heal it. You come out on the other side. You're going to be stronger. You're going to be more resilient. You're going to be healthy. It's going to allow you to have healthy relationships. You're not going to have people to depend on and look to for your happiness. You're going to be happy internally, and I get a little intense about this because really your thoughts dictate your actions and the way your life is going to be led.
No, absolutely. And it is like it's physiological. The more negative your mindset, your brain rewires that way. So if you think negatively, then all you're going to see is negative shit. And that's going to be your perspective. And like you're saying,
Yep.
when you're proactive about it, even if the initial thing you see is negative, you can do like that little bit of like cognitive reappraisal and be like, okay, like, yeah, that was shitty, but like, what's the good part that's come out of it? And even, that's why there is like such that movement of, like post-traumatic growth. Like after going through something horrendous, it can actually change your entire perspective on life.
Yeah.
And it's obviously, something that you have gone through. And just before I get to the ayahuasca, which I have been practicing.
Nice. Perfect.
Mike is well aware that I have been practicing trying to say that word for, I reckon, the last week. It's just it had my number.
Yeah. You conquered it.
Wait, I'll stuff it up eventually. Where you were at, like, when you sort of watched this, and it sounds like a wonderful like program and podcast that really spoke to you, and you found this as an option, all of the differing emotions and things that you were feeling was at any point, and as long as you're comfortable answering, did you find yourself having any kind of like suicidal ideation or thoughts or plans, inclination, anything like that?
No, I never did, thank God. Never any suicidal ideation, just depression. It wasn't deep depression. It wasn't like I was waking up every day and couldn't get out of my own way. It was it just I my analogy would be to where when I was younger, I would wake up on a Sunday and have 8 hours of schoolwork that day. It just wasn't happy. It wasn't this morbid depression,
Yeah.
but I just, it wasn't myself, and it wasn't, I just wasn't that happy.
Yeah. All right. No, thank you for sharing that. I just
Absolutely.
was wondering if that was, something that ventured, or you ventured down that path, because obviously a lot of people in your situation do, especially come retirement, and retirement isn't necessarily specifically on your terms. I think it's a really challenging pivot for a lot of people, especially a lot of men who have had that really identifiable career for so long.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about ayahuasca.
All right, ayahuasca. It's great. All right, so I was watching the podcast, realized we had to do it. We booked our journey this past March. All right, so we drove up to Orlando. It's about 2.5 hours from where we live. So it's going to be a Friday. It's going to be a weekend retreat. So you drink Friday night, Saturday, and then Saturday night. So 3-ceremony weekend. Friday you get there, kind of shown around the grounds, you give it an orientation, told what to expect, kind of the etiquette as well. Shortly thereafter, you're brought back to the back of the property, the ceremonial area. It's outside. Nice area, kind of like an open yard. There's some trees in the middle. There's a big fire pit in the middle. There's 2 buildings where people go if they want a little more of a silent journey. And then the perimeter has alpine chairs. I think that weekend that we drank, there's probably 35 people in attendance. Speakers in the perimeter as well. You have, nice new age music playing during the ceremony. Um, as we're preparing, I'm nervous. I have no idea what to expect. In your mind, you kind of throwing around scenarios like, what if something gets stuck when I'm in this experience, and it doesn't go back to what it
Did you
was.
do any kind of like research as to what the properties were of ayahuasca, or
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, we definitely did our research, watched a bunch of videos on people, explaining their journeys. The amazing thing about ayahuasca is that two vines have to be used.
Yep.
There are 80,000 vines in the Amazon. So the fact that, because one of these vines is an MAO inhibitor, and if you don't use it, the second vine that provides the psychedelic effects will not work.
Yep.
So, excuse me, in used together, it's a beautiful medicine. Used separately, it does nothing.
Yep.
So the fact the universe or whatever higher power told the first person thousands of years ago to use these two vines should tell everyone all they need to know. I mean,
yeah.
I would love to get a statistician tell me what the odds are of that happening, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
They're astronomical.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Maybe just, and before, because I definitely want to hear like about your experience, but some listeners, and I know before we like spoke originally, I've heard of the term, but I didn't really know anything about it. Like, what can you tell our listeners about sort of what actually ayahuasca is? Obviously, like it's a plant from the combination of two plants from like the Amazon. Can you sort of like explain it a little bit more, or a bit about like the history or anything of it at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's been used for thousands of years. It's considered sacred medicine. I consider it sacred medicine myself.
Yeah.
Tribes of the Amazon would use it to find higher consciousness, to heal various traumas that they suffered. Yeah, it's number one, it's a plant-based medicine. It is not a drug. People think that it's a drug. I want to make that 100% clear. It's not a drug. It's not something that's ever going to be abused. It's not something that makes you feel euphoric. In no way, shape, or form is this something that you're going to want to do continually. Some of this journey is profound pain. It's not like you take this stuff and you just experience like sometimes this enlightenment and everything's great. I mean, people go through profound pain to get to the other side. Yeah, really. I mean, you'll be in a ceremony, you'll hear people cursing, screaming, crying. I'll be honest with you, I think it's beautiful because people are healing. As much pain as there is in the area, in the space, there's healing going on as well. And I remember I'm always awake. I sit in my Alpine chair. A lot of people will get on mats and fall asleep. I'm always awake, and I'm constantly looking around, and I just think it's like one of the most beautiful experiences you could ever have. Just seeing all the healing, as much as there's profound pain, people are healing from it. And it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, like prior to our conversation today, I did a little bit of research so that I would like understand,
Yep.
what
DMT. That's the one thing I wanted to tell you.
So
DMT
it's
is the
dimethyltryptamine.
Yep.
Is it? Yeah. And so,
Yep.
So it's classed as a hallucinogen, but it has serotonin-like properties. And like you're saying that it's there actually aren't like addictive properties like
correct
opioid sort of similar type of thing. And the translation of it, I think it had a couple of different translations, but what I sort of liked, it was either like vine of the soul. When I was doing my research, I was like, that sounds sort of like sweet in terms of like what you've sort of spoken about, like the sensation is like, and it's been used for medicinal and spiritual purposes for thousands of years, and dating back to at least 3,000 years ago. And this is just sort of like from a couple of notes from like the research that I had been doing, but like produces powerful changes in people's levels of awareness and their consciousness, and which is basically what it's like central to the therapeutic benefits that people get out of, is because of that change in awareness and that change of consciousness, and what you sort of experience during that time. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely.
And yeah, it can like increase mindfulness capabilities, cognitive flexibility, and emotional regulation, which like you're saying, all like the different things that you process through. And probably one of the main things that I wanted to say before I want to hear about your journey on it was with the like the altered state of awareness, and like you're saying, people can actually re-experience like these negative memories, negative emotions, like traumatic things that have happened. But part of that journey, it sounds like it's developing a new perspective on them, or like a new perspective on like problems that are causing them like emotional distress or dysregulation and all that kind of thing. Does that sort of cover it a little bit? Like,
Yeah. I mean, I think it's actually it's the best researched material I've ever had in someone interview me. But yeah, it's absolutely everything you say is true.
You know what? I'll send you the journal articles, because there's like a few, and it sort of, you know, if you're into reading that kind of stuff, yeah. I'll
no, absolutely, that'd be great.
Yeah,
nothing. Yeah, I definitely want to educate myself as much as I can on everything. Yeah, but
I'm a nerd. I can't help it.
Nothing wrong with that. My wife's a research nerd too.
But so yeah, so you're saying that, you know, they're basically like they brew this drink. It's from like these two separate plants that don't work unless they're put together. Yeah, and you're saying, like, you know, nervous and apprehensive and everything about it. Like, tell us about that experience for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you know, we get brought to the ceremonial area. Like I said, it's very sacred, and there are several not really. Well, there's a couple of prayers, I guess, that they'll say. I mean, it's very, you know, the whole ceremony is beautiful, and I do not take this lightly, and I hope that no one does who takes this medicine. But you know, essentially, you're given a shot glass, and that is the juice from the vines, that boiled for a certain amount of hours, drained out all the impurities, and I don't know. I'm trying to think like the consistency. It's a little bit thicker than milk. Not the greatest tasting thing in the world, but
yeah, I heard
shoot it down.
Bitter.
Yeah, it's bitter. I mean, it is what it is. I guess you know, no one's really going to want to keep drinking it for the taste. I guess that's one good thing. Maybe that's why the universe did that. But moderation with this stuff. But you know, essentially, you shoot it down, and then it's funny. Once you take it, you kind of everyone's just sitting there, kind of waiting for the effects to take effect, and it varies on times. For me, it's probably about 45 minutes in. I remember the first journey, about 30 minutes in, I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, son of a bitch. Don't tell me this isn't going to work for me.
Bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. Just drove from 2.5 hours for this. But about 40 minutes in, the ground started moving. I'm like, here we go.
Yeah.
And it's crazy the way it happens. Like, most of the time, you'll start seeing geometric patterns in the sky. And most people have that effect, which is crazy that most people are having the same effect in that respect. And then everyone's journey kind of goes off everywhere. But so mine, essentially, the first time. Now, people usually sense a female presence. They call her mother or mother ayahuasca. It was the same for me. So the way mine felt was that I was kind of looking at a big screen TV, and mother was in the top left-hand corner. And when it started, she just appeared. And I remember kind of putting my hands up. I'm like, I surrender to you. I'm like, please help me. And it's very powerful. I was crying. I'm like, I need to lose this ego. I need to lose this rage. You know, I want to become a better man. And every time I asked for something, it was granted, like, bam, bam, like at the snap of a finger. I just feel myself getting lighter and lighter and lighter. And at one point, I remember I'm watching the volunteers, and they're there to help us. Anything we need, they're there to help us. So I'm just watching them. I'm like, man, these people are so graceful, so loving, so empathetic. I'm like, I want to be like them. So I was telling them, like, please make me a more empathetic man. I want to be, you know, more loving. And it's funny when I tell the story, my wife's like, you sound like you were an animal. You know, you were empathetic, you were loving. I'm like, yeah, I understand it, baby, but I wanted to be more.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm like, I have this rage I need to get rid of. And she, at one point, she was telling me, she's like, you know, your time has passed. You're no longer that thing. So you don't need this fire up here and everything that comes along with it. She's like, it'll be down here now. It's still in you. If you ever need to call on it, it will be there. She's like, you're a warrior. You will always be. but you don't need that fire like that anymore, with the hatred and the rage and everything that comes with it. And I remember you kind of go in and out of your experience. So you'll be lucid, then you'll be deep in. And I kind of came out of that and I was at peace with it. Like all of a sudden, like my time has passed, man. I'm at peace. I'm cool. And my father and I, as I was saying before, had a very contentious relationship, and she was bringing him to me in my journey. He's deceased. And it was crazy because it's as though we were in front of the biggest, brightest Vegas marquee, and I could feel people in back of me, and he was going to be walking towards me. And during this build up, the music that's going on in the area starts building up louder and louder. In reality, it was not. And then it just builds to this crescendo. In reality, it was not. And then all of a sudden it stops. And in reality, music is still going on in the ceremonial area, but it just stopped. And now I'm waiting. And I'm looking down like this alleyway. And finally I realized he's not going to show. And I throw my hands up. I'm like, fucking coward. I knew he wouldn't show. He could not talk about emotion. But with that, 55 years of everything between and I was just gone. Like, gone. You know, I was thinking about stuff that had bothered me in the past, and there was no emotional charge there, like instantaneously.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's to this day. Yeah, it's gone. So, you know, I was at peace with that. And, you know, basically the rest of the experience was kind of she and I talking, so to speak. And she was just telling me, like, you know, you're a warrior, you'll always be. You know, I made you like this for a reason. What's crazy is 5 out of 7 times I've journeyed with ayahuasca, the um, American Indian team had come in, Native Americans, to where I'm in the room with them and they are dressing me up and we're going into battle. And I remember the last time it happened, it was the most tense night of my life. I'm literally putting on war paint under my eyes. I didn't remember doing it. My wife told me the next day, she's like, what were you doing? I'm like, what? I'm like, holy shit, I remember that now.
Yeah.
And they were literally dressing me up, putting the arrows on my back, and we were going to war. And it was just so powerful. And as I'm coming out of that journey on Friday night, and let me preface this by saying that 2 former coworkers and friends from Suffolk County Police Department, they committed suicide 3 weeks before, a week apart. Sergeant killed himself in a precinct locker room. But I had no intentions of getting into the space I'm in now. But as I'm coming out of it, the universe told me, you're healed from your PTSD. Now, it's an ever-evolving process with your healing. It's not like I think I'm healed. But essentially, in many respects, I was. And she said, your life's purpose is to now go forth and heal other vets and first responders of their PTSD and traumas. And I literally said, okay. I accepted it. Just said, okay. Wasn't sure how it was going to be implemented, but I'm like, I have my life's purpose. It was so funny because another guy that had been sitting next to me went into a quiet room. He comes out now. It's probably about midnight. And he's like, how'd your journey go? I'm like, good, brother. The universe just told me my new life's purposes. He's like, oh, that's a good journey. I was like, yes, it was. And I remember I was just sitting there. I was, you know, fairly lucid at the time. And I remember just kind of playing my chin like this. And I'm thinking, I'm like, man, this is my new life's purpose. And I accepted it and, you know, gladly. And that was it.
Wow. That sounds like an incredibly powerful and emotional experience for you.
Oh, it was the most profound cathartic experience I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
The words dilute the magic. You know, I wish everyone that I tell it to could experience it themselves, because I still have no words for what happened.
Yeah.
It is incredible. I am not a flower child. I have no Birkenstocks. I'm not a hippie, but this healed me. And I am the biggest proponent, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to get as many people to this medicine as I can. I mean, my end game goal is to open up a healing center. That's just seems like my life's purpose, and I would love to do it. So
yeah, no, that's really amazing, really powerful, and I guess like probably important to note for anyone listening and who's like, oh, this kind of sounds kind of cool. Like there's no part of you that actually like loses consciousness, it's what's considered like an altered state of consciousness.
Correct.
So like you're saying, you drift in and out of like being lucid, but at no point are you like necessarily asleep or unconscious or like anything like that.
Correct. I mean, some people choose to go to sleep, and
Yeah.
that's how they carry on their journey. But
Yeah.
no, it's not going to put you to sleep or anything like that.
Yeah.
Additionally, I'm sorry. Please.
No. You please go.
Okay, so this was, the next two journeys weren't as powerful. They were very. Let me see. What's the word I want to use? They were very. I don't know. I guess empowering, and just kind of reinforced the message that was going to be my life's purpose going on.
Yeah.
So we end that weekend. I go home. I filmed a Facebook Live video on that Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Cried on Facebook. Never would have been able to do that prior to.
Yeah.
Was actually proud of myself and received 3 calls from buddies the next day who were going through it. One of which who had a gun in his mouth in a not too recent past. And they were telling me that the fact that I was showing emotion told them or made them feel like they were fine and not weak to do the same. I was like, wow. I mean, this is so powerful.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
I will just, to the day I die, continue to do so. I have no problem showing vulnerability. I want to show these guys and girls that I'm genuine as could be. I'll show them all my missteps. But my most powerful message is showing and feeling emotion is not weakness. It's actually strength. It's the opposite.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. And as well, like because this ayahuasca isn't like actually like a drug, and like a lot of other like things with like hallucinogenic properties like LSD or mushrooms or like anything like that, like I don't think you're necessarily in control of how long this experience lasts for, whereas it seems sort of from the reading that I did, it seems fairly sort of like standard. Like you were saying, you drink it or like ingest it sort of like 30 to 40 minutes later is about like the average that people will start to feel its effects. And then the peak of that experience occurs between like sort of 60 to 120 minute range. And then it sort of starts to like fade or dissipate around like the 4-hour mark. So realistically, if you're having some kind of like an experience where you're like, oh, I'm not really comfortable with this, like it's like kind of basically just like a 4-hour period. Is that sort of correct?
Yeah, pretty much. One thing I would say is I would agree with the the most intense being like 60 to 120. And then what you typically will do is get a booster shot at the 2-hour mark.
Oh, okay, cool.
So you get it again, it'll put you back deeply into that state. And most people's journeys are about 4.5 hours. Obviously everyone's physiological, effects are different. So some people will take longer.
Yeah.
Purging has a lot to do with your journey as well.
Okay.
Purging essentially is throwing up, but it's much more symbolic than that. It's essentially getting rid of stuff that no longer serves you, kind of getting rid of the toxins and poison in your body.
Yeah.
And I don't think you really go into the deep state until you purge.
Yeah, that's what the literature and the research said. It's kind of like it can be, I don't know if it happens to everyone, but it can be like that, quite like an intense physiological reaction of like, vomiting, but then the really peak, they call it like a spiritual experience tends to occur like after that point.
Yeah, it has for me. This is a funny story. On the most intense night of my life, I was about to purge and I'm staring at the fire. And it was crazy because multiple people the next day said, I've never seen more intensity than you had in your face just staring at that fire. So as I'm staring at the fire, I'm like kind of rocking back. It was insane. I had no shirt on. I never walk around with no shirt, even though I'm sitting here with sleeveless. But I didn't even realize I took it off. That's how crazy it was. I kind of looked and I see all my tats. I'm like, where's my clothes? And my shirt and sweatshirt right next to me. But as I'm about to purge, as I'm purging, I'm like kind of kidding around Mother Ayahuasca. I'm like, I can take anything you give. Now, normally I'll purge like 4 or 5 times, put it down, I'm done. I purged 20 times this particular time. I've never done it. I'm 4 to 5 times every time. 20 times, on a 20 time, I said, Mother, I apologize. That was ego. That was ego. And I literally stopped instantaneously. It was unbelievable.
Mother Ayahuasca was like, fuck you, buddy.
Yep, that's exactly what she did. She's like, all right, you want to play, motherfucker? Let's see what you can take. It was unbelievable.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That is a
It
funny
was
story.
nuts. And then one other time I couldn't purge, so I asked her for help, and all of a sudden, instantaneously, all I could smell was ayahuasca around me. I purged within a minute. It's unbelievable that she'll
Yeah.
give you what you ask for sometimes.
Yeah.
And
so like you're saying, like, so you've done it, I think it was, did you say 5 or 7 times?
7 times total.
7 times. And like, I guess sort of talk about like you're saying that it has aided in your healing journey, because obviously, we don't always necessarily like completely heal from PTSD. It's just something that we learn to live with. But your healing journey and finding relief from it, like, is it something that is kind of like, you do once a month because that's kind of what keeps you in like the like euphoric sort of after effects of it? Or is it something that you can like kind of feel a sense like building up in your body where you're like, I need that experience again? Sort of like talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, people say that they feel Aya calling them. So I wouldn't say there's any precise timeline. I'm starting to feel that call now, and the last time I consumed was, what were we in? May, July. I think July. Yeah, the last time I consumed was July. But I'm kind of feeling it calling me again. My mom passed away in June. We were estranged. Oh, thank you. We were estranged like the last month and a half of her life because I have an insidious narcissistic sister. But I kind of want to journey with it to see if, um, she's kind of brought into my journey, or, I know there's a lot of stuff that I thought I dealt with, but it's probably still there. So maybe it needs to be brought up and dealt with, deeply. And I'm kind of getting that again, but I don't think there's any precise timeline. It's kind of when you feel that you need it again, people going back to journey with it.
Yeah, no, that sort of definitely makes sense, and it's not like because I think there's been sort of talk about it, in sort of amongst sort of like celebrity circles of like people doing it, and so I think sometimes it can get like a reputation of being something that like people do like recreationally, whereas it really sort of, and I'm sure there are people who do it in that respect, but it kind of almost sounds like it's more of like a deeply felt like spiritual experience. And we all, I guess, maybe define spirituality in like different ways. There's religion and all of like the different things, but it sort of, sounds like it's much more, especially like the way that you talk about it, much more of like a spiritual experience for you.
Yeah, I don't see how people could kind of use this as a novelty. It's, I mean, it is deep. People, listen, there are 2 people that I know of that were getting the smell. One was gasoline, and I'm forgetting the other one. And they couldn't figure out why this was happening. Every journey they were getting a smell, and they were getting, I forgot what else they were going through, but they both realized that they were getting sexually abused as children. One was getting gasoline put over their nose, and the other one was getting, oh my God, I always call it formaldehyde.
I know. Yeah, I know the thing.
The last, it's an ill, YLL. Chlorophyll.
Chlorophyll.
Yeah. So they were getting raped by their uncle, and he was chloroforming them. And it's amazing where this medicine takes. Like, they had no idea, and then these memories were so repressed, and then they brought it up.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
unfortunately,
that altered state of consciousness
yep,
allows it to come to the forefront.
yeah. So there are people going through some incredibly profound pain. Unfortunately, there's so many sexual abuse victims out there. But it heals as well. It heals greatly.
And from it obviously sort of sounds like the fact that you've done it a few times now, and it's really almost like you're saying, like a bit of like a spiritual community who really engage in it and find benefit out of it. Is it something from like having conversations with these people? Is it something that like your choice was to pursue this route as opposed to any kind of like structured psychotherapy or pharmacological answers or anything like that. Like, do you find that people kind of use it in conjunction with maybe seeing a therapist or a counselor or anything like that? Or is it tend to be, and obviously you're only speaking from your personal experience and conversations you've had, but, you know, does it tend to be like using conjunction, or like people are kind of one camp or the other?
Most of my experience is with vets and first responders. So I would say that that is the route that they choose to go down. You know, I call it 10 years of therapy in one weekend. You're breaking down the doors, and, you know, it's like the Concorde arriving. Um, I had a conversation with a man named DJ Shipley. He's a retired Navy SEAL, Team 6 guy. I went to training with his company in April, and he had used Ibogaine for his journey. And, you know, we just had a deep, deep conversation about everything. And, you know, he was basically echoing the sentiments of myself earlier. Like, um, he couldn't control his temper a little bit. He would yell at his kids or his wife and then feel so bad about it. And, you know, again, it was us not being able to feel things as men. And then we were both talking like we both feel now. We're both happy. We're both proud of the men we are now. Um, you know, his Ibogaine is very intense. It's like a 12 to 14 hour experience. My buddy Wiz Buckley calls it human luge, where you're just kind of on a bed like this for 12 to 14 hours. But yeah, most of the guys that I've spoken to in kind of the warrior culture, so to speak, it's one or the other. You know, I don't think most guys think traditional counseling is going to do it for them.
Yeah. And I guess as well, like, what would sort of interest me too is like people from our professions, and then of course, like, especially like veterans and in particular like the men, but like the women as well. Like, we're used to being in charge, in control, you know, maintaining that control is sometimes that's all that we have. And, you know, yes, it can lead to hypervigilance and, you know, a lot of the issues that we struggle with. But how, either like, did you personally find it, or like you're saying, like some of the conversations you've had with like, you know, men who were like SEALs and other, you know, other veterans or other like first responders, in terms of like losing that sense of control? Is it something that they sort of wrestle with, or is it because it's allows such like a harmonious experience that it just kind of is something that they almost like welcome to a certain extent?
Good question. I think a lot of guys wrestle with the fact that they're going to lose control. I embraced it, to be honest with you. I'm like, whatever I'm doing is not working right now. So I am kind of giving us up to the higher power, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. You know, I wasn't fighting it. Um, I had no problem relinquishing control. A lot of guys do, but once you hit that point in your life where you need something, you know, at that point, I think they're like, screw it, control or not, I don't care. I have to try this because nothing else is working. And, you know, the alternative is not good. I mean, you see so many vets and first responders committing suicide because they think they have nothing's going to help them, you know, and that's a horrible way to live. Listen, the amount of antidepressants, SSRIs that are prescribed to these guys and girls, to me, is disgusting, number one. And what cracks me up is there's no stigma. I was at one retreat where a retired Green Beret was prescribed 17 meds at one time. Another one, Army Corpsman, 11 at one time. Now, there's no stigma for these guys being prescribed 17 and 11 meds, respectively. But if they want to try ayahuasca or ibogaine or psilocybin, you know, natural plant medicines that they're not going to be addicted to, that are not going to steer them towards suicide, there's a stigma for that. Why is that? You know, I mean, one of the ones is because these pharmaceutical companies don't want them being easily provided until they come up with a synthetic version that magically it's going to be approved by the FDA, as we'll see. But it's amazing that the stigma is no stigma for that. These things are known to cause suicidal thoughts, ideologies, people to kill themselves. One of my best friends did it after a week being on them. But there is stigma for these other things that are healing, non-addictive, and are known to work. It's incredible.
Well, I think as well, I mean, you know, delving into the amount of money and like involved in like the political things and the what do they call them, like think of what they're called, but basically the people who like influence politicians by like
Lobbyists.
Lobbyists, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, like that's a whole thing in this country that like I'm not from here, and it just blows my mind. But that's
Billions.
that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah. Billions.
But I think what is probably like one of the most important things to take away from it is that I think healthcare and mental health and wellness, it's a fucking spectrum. And so like you're saying, what works for one is not going to work for another. And like even trying to, for people who do go down the path of, like antidepressants, like one will work amazingly. Another one, like you're saying, will give them suicidal ideation or just will not work with them whatsoever. Like different things work for different people. Ayahuasca's like worked for you, just freaking exercising and getting the eating right and changing their diet and all that kind of thing works for other people in terms of depression. Like it needs to be like this holistic, not just like a holistic approach, but like holistic option and like a continuum of things available for people to be able to find what works right for them. And realistically, at the end of the day, all that should fucking matter is getting people healthy. And in particular, our veterans, in particular, our first responders, because they're the ones putting themselves out there, whether it's defending their community, serving their community, or serving their country. And then a lot of the time, they're just fucking left out to dry. It's like, oh yeah, cool. Cheers, mate. Thanks for your service. Like, go fuck yourself now. And it's disgraceful that they will pump billions, probably even trillions of dollars into wartime efforts, but yet they don't fucking look after these people when they come home.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. We have illegals coming in, we're giving them free stuff, and we have veterans dying on the daily. First of all, the conditions in a lot of these VAs is deplorable. Conditions a lot of these barracks these guys have to live in is deplorable. It's amazing. We need to get a collective group effort going on to kind of make it a war, to get these guys and girls what they deserve.
Yeah.
You ask them to put their lives on the line, they gladly did it. And, you're killing them slowly now. If they didn't die in battle, you're killing them every day of their lives. Disgusting.
And it's not just sort of unique to America either. Like there's a lot of stuff going on in like the veteran community in Australia at the moment. They just did like a royal commission, which is kind of like a congressional investigation, basically like that, about like the suicide rates of veterans from our country. And they're going through and like withdrawing people's commendations and awards for like our version of like this, like SEALs, like our SAS. And they're like removing awards and medals and stuff like that. And there's a lot of heavy shit going on in that community at the moment. And I don't know enough about it to knowledgeably comment on it, but it's something I have to sort of do more of a deep dive on, because it's not just here. Like I don't think many countries look after their veterans in the way that they should be, and in the way that they deserve. And then,
absolutely.
And then that functions into our first responder populations, because I mean, how many veterans leave and then they come and they become a firefighter, they become a cop, they do all of the things. And so it's incredibly frustrating. One thing I sort of did want to, I guess, ask you about was you sort of made like a couple of comments and very honestly so, when you said that you were certain moments or certain jobs where you sort of sensed yourself getting like upset at a scene or something really bad, and you kind of took a minute and you were just like, fucking don't be weak, don't do this, don't do that. And I understand that was sort of like an internal way that you sort of were managing yourself and bearing it down. Can I ask, was that a not like a behavior, but a like an opinion that you kind of projected at that time, that anyone speaking up was weak? Like I know that's the overall stigma of a lot of our professions, but was that sort of something that you projected back at that time too?
No, I don't think I ever projected it. I guess I had it in the back of my mind. I would never speak ill of someone going through, um, something traumatic and feeling the ill effects from it. You would see, and it sucked, but you would see guys and girls committing suicide kind of periodically through my career, and you would kind of see the source of their pain, and a lot of it tracked back to the job. So it's not something I would ever make fun of someone for, but in my mind, yeah, sometimes I would be like, man, it's weakness. As I mean, it's huge ego, but I think collectively as a group, I think it's how a lot of us look at it back then.
Yeah, yeah. And so I know you had previously mentioned, and it was something that I looked at before we jumped on our conversation today, that there were a few sort of suicides within your police department. And I think from what I looked at, it was like in February of just this year that there were 4 suicides in the Suffolk County Police Department in a 4-week span. It was 2 police officers, a probationary officer, and a sheriff's deputy. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yep, that's correct.
I mean, there's something to be said, obviously, for like contagion is, something that's obviously really challenging and real when it comes to people dying by suicide. Were these, and I hope you don't mind me asking, were these, people that you knew?
Yeah, 2 out of the 4 I knew. The ones that committed suicide from my precinct, and it's amazing you say contagion because after the first one killed himself, his funeral was held, and the sergeant had made some comments that guys and girls really should have paid more attention to, as far as I see kind of why he did it. Now he's out of pain, and just made a few comments that really should have caught people's ear, especially at a sensitive time like that. They didn't. Um, the first guy did it. He was went through a bad divorce, and he just was not handling that well. The second guy, I really don't know why he did it. I don't know if anyone kind of came up with that, the reasoning why, but in some respects, it doesn't even matter.
We never truly know.
No, you don't know what's going on in,
Nah.
in someone's head, unfortunately. He was making lieutenant 2 days later. He went there that day to clean out his locker. He brought everything up to his office, and no one noticed that he put his cell phone, his wallet, and he took his wedding ring off and put it on top of everything. Said he was going to catch a workout, went downstairs, and that's when he did it. Really, to be honest with you, I don't even know if I would have caught it if I saw him taking his wedding ring off, saying he was going to catch a lift. I take mine off when I hit the gym. So, yeah, no one really knows why. Let me see. We have 5 squads in my precinct, and we have had in squad 4 people commit suicide in I think like the last 10 years. One of which was the first guy that did it. He was the 4th in his squad, and it's just so sad to see. Again, sometimes you don't know what's going on, but I tell guys and girls, pay attention. Not listen. There's going to be times where it happens, and no one's going to catch a sign prior to. But if you're talking to a guy and you're like, "What's up, brother? How you doing?" He's like, "I'm all right." That man is not all right. Talk to him and see what's going on. And it may be a little more difficult for civilians. It's easy for us because we talk and use this vernacular all the time. But ask someone, what's going on? Are you suicidal? Literally come out and ask them that question. You're not prying. They will thank you later on. They're essentially asking for help. Otherwise, they'd be like, yeah, I'm good, brother. How are you? If he hits you with that, I'm all right. He wants to talk, and it's not just cops who have to pay attention. Civilians, if you know anyone, and it doesn't have to be cop or fireman or a vet, first responder, just pay attention to how people are acting, what they're saying, what they're not saying. You really have to. And if you think it's a problem, talk to them. Literally talk. Are you suicidal? Ask them that question. You'll be surprised. Some people are like, yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, because and that is very much the thing where, like, I think, like you're saying, a broad amount of the public have that fear that they're like, oh my God, if I say the S word, like, I'm going to put it in their head. And that is like, could not be more inaccurate.
No.
And like, I used to work on for want of a better term, like a suicide hotline. And it was like the first question we would ask, like, hello, you're speaking, with Erin. Can I ask your name? And then it was like, hello, so-and-so. Can I ask, are you feeling suicidal today? And it is that genuine, just bringing the word up, because it's like, you can't fuck around with that kind of word, because it means what it means. Like, are you, like, are you feeling okay? Like, you can give a number of different answers to something like that, but it's like, Mike, I've known you for however long, like, I know you to be this, this, and this, and lately I've seen you this, this, and this, like, how are you doing? Da, 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 da. Like, I'm worried that you're feeling suicidal. Can I check in with you? Are you feeling it all that way? Like, just the plain language of it. It's important.
Yeah, literally. It's that directed to the point.
Yep.
It's easy for me and you to do it because we've done it so much in our careers, and it's a tough question for someone who's never asked it of anyone else. I understand that, but think of the alternative. And listen, if you stop that person from doing that, I always use this analogy. A suicide is like a spider web in a windshield. It cracks, and you start getting all these other cracks. Someone commits suicide. Now you have the children. This is how drug addicts are made. Prostitutes, child trafficking, because they need to find their love elsewhere. Generational trauma, domestic abusers. You ask that person if they're suicidal, and they say yes. You get them help. That doesn't occur. That wake or funeral that you're going to attend, just think about any wake or funeral. It doesn't have to be someone who committed suicide, any natural death. All those people are affected. And if that you ask that question and you get this person help, none of those people are affected. Like the value in you stepping in cannot be overstated. And you should never feel like you're prying. If you're having those thoughts, something's going on with him or her already.
Yeah.
These thoughts don't just pop into your head like, hey, is this guy suicidal? No. You're watching actions and you're listening to them speak, or
your intuition is telling you something.
Yeah, exactly. That voice in your head is telling you something's going on, and it's not telling you for no reason.
No, absolutely. And look, my dad passed away by suicide in the 80s. Mental health was not like the thing that it is these days, and there were no resources. There was just nothing. And I literally am a product of everything you were just saying. Like, I was raised by an incredibly strong mum who did everything in the best way that she could after being left on her own with two young kids. But a loss like that, in particular, like any loss ricochets, but a loss like that, it makes you question your self-worth when you're that child, or it makes you consider whether you're to blame or share in that guilt when you're the spouse. Like it really just, and I remember reading like an article about it one time, and it was back in like the 70s or something like that. It was, they posited that for every one suicide, there were like 6 people who were like immediately affected, and they've gone back and looked at that, and the number is closer to, I think it's like 137 people.
Yeah, I was going to say 6 is phenomenally low.
Yeah, and so that was a while ago, but like, and that's kind of like that direct, friends, family, like that kind of like immediacy. But when you pull into it, like at a police department, a member of like the, we call it the ADF, like the Australian Defence Force, the veteran community, like a SEAL, like firefighter, police officer, paramedic, anyone, like then you're looking like no shit at like thousands of people being impacted, and who already might be struggling with that suicidal ideation, and can, with that contagion thing, like, you go, oh, like that person seemed fucking awesome. They didn't seem like they had any problems. Like, if they can't cope, how can I cope? And it can kind of really sort of like have that impact. So I think I would rather have a really fucking awkward conversation where I asked someone if they were feeling suicidal, and they were like, oh my God, no, like I just fucking didn't sleep well last night and I'm good, like whatever. I'd rather have that kind of awkward interaction than be like sitting there at their funeral going like, I fucking sent something, and and look, what someone else does is in no way someone else's fault or responsibility. We are all responsible for our own things, but it doesn't mean that we can't give that person grace, compassion, empathy and just support. Just be there for them. Ultimately.
Absolutely. 100%.
And I guess probably like the one last question that I wanted to ask you about ayahuasca is, from your experience or the experiences, like anecdotal ones of anyone that you know in that community, is there anyone in particular who you would say, I don't know if it's a good idea for you, or like I know sort of different medications can kind of impact with it.
Absolutely.
So obviously if you're on anything, perhaps not, or just be a little bit more mindful. But is there anyone that you kind of can think off the top of your head that you're like, I don't know if this is something that I would recommend for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Number one, as far as there are a few mental illnesses that would really preclude you from using ayahuasca. Schizophrenia is definitely number one.
Bipolar?
Yeah, I think bipolar is number two. And very important, if you're on SSRIs or antidepressants, you must wean yourself off, not just stop and be off for a month. So the process could take 2 months from when you begin your weaning until when you could drink. So you have to wean and then be off completely for a month prior to. And that's actually dangerous. Some antidepressants and SSRIs. So that is a huge caveat if you're going to drink.
Yep.
Most facilities have medical intakes and they'll tell you, they give you the list of medications. It is actually a huge list. Like it could be something as small as Afrin nasal spray that could potentially affect your journey. You're getting a little bit crazy there with, just getting very, very specific. But, these other things are actually dangerous to be, currently on. You cannot, under any circumstances, be on those. But I think schizophrenia, bipolar, I think those are really the two that I'm aware of that would preclude you from drinking.
Okay. No, and that's, it was just something that I sort of thought was important to put out there, because we're obviously, you're sharing about the positive benefits of it, and in particular, like for you and a lot of people that you're aware of, it really has been that incredibly positive experience and rejuvenating and healing and all that kind of thing. But we want people to be safe at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's first and foremost.
And so after, like you're saying, like that your first experience was back in March of this year, and we are speaking in September now. You talk so warmly and so like passionately about now your mission sort of going forward, and like we mentioned previously about being a mental health advocate and speaking about not only about your mental health and your struggles, but being there to support others. How does that like place you now, like I guess in terms of what steps are you walking to kind of live that truth that you feel like is yours now?
Great question. So the question's in terms of my like day to day, or in terms of what I'm doing to help others?
I mean, I guess like a little bit of both, like as in, are you sort of like giving like motivational or like mental health like speeches? Are you part of any or affiliated with any kind of like organization? Is like what are you doing to kind of like be a part of what this movement or mission is, or help in whatever way that you are doing?
Okay, so I'll start off with, as after the conclusion of my first journey, I was really trying to decide how I was going to implement what I was going to do. So I was put in touch with another healing center here in Florida, closer to me. And I called the owner, who's actually a vet himself, told him about my journey, give him my bio, and said, do you guys have a vets and first responders program at your center? He said, no. I said, all right, I'd like to create and implement one if you'd like to work together. So he agreed. We did that. He actually runs it, but there's another owner who is busier booking higher revenue producing things. So right now that's kind of put on hold. Additionally, I was volunteering at Soul Quest Ayahuasca. They've since shuttered. They had I had a wrongful death suit in relation to another medication called Cambo a few years ago. They declared bankruptcy and shut it. Unfortunately, it broke my heart. But that's that. So yeah, I actually pivoted to there's a couple things I'm doing now. I'm getting my certification as a peer specialist, so I'm going to be able to work with different organizations who provide support for vets and first responders who are going through it. So
Wow.
we partner up with other organizations. So if someone kind of has a crisis, they'll contact us.
Yeah.
I'll be contacted. I'll go out. I'll become kind of the advocate for that particular person. What's beautiful is it's HIPAA protected. So if you come to me with a substance abuse problem, I don't have to report to anyone. We can get you into rehab. No one's, the stigma from anyone finding out is erased. No one's taking your guns. So, that's definitely one of the biggest impediments to guys and girls seeking help is that stigma. The fact that everyone's going to find out, the fact that they're going to take your guns. There's definitely policy changes coming down the pike in most departments because they realize that's the biggest impediment to guys and girls seeking help.
Yeah.
Additionally, I had seen a speaker named Travis Howes a couple of months ago in Miami. He's a retired fireman and he does mental health advocacy.
I saw him in like Mansfield last maybe May up here in Massachusetts. Yeah.
Okay. So I saw him. I told my wife, that's what I want to do. I want to start public speaking.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can reach these guys and girls. I know it. I'm like, this is what I'm made for.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of going on podcasts now. I think I want to start my own podcast as well. Myself and a SEAL named Zach Ferguson just did a live a couple of weeks ago. I think we may partner up to do something regular. So I kind of I want to get better. I'm hiring someone to help me writing speeches, and then I want to just dive in head first.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not afraid of failure. I'll get on stage. If it doesn't go that well, it doesn't go that well. I don't anticipate that happening because it's such a passion of mine.
Yeah.
And, I have this personality that I can get on there and talk. And I'm open, vulnerable, and I'm not shy. That's one thing about me. All I want to do is affect guys and girls.
Yeah.
So, it's another thing the universe told me, like, I made you look like this. So listen, I'm tatted up. I'm like 240 pounds. So if I get on stage, like I was talking to DJ Shippy, that SEAL, I'm like, you have any words of wisdom? He's like, bro, you get on that stage looking like that, talking about feelings, man, making these guys cry. He's like, they're going to listen to every fucking word you have to say. He's like, that's all I have to tell you. I'm like, fair enough, brother.
Yep.
So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about my most intimate moments, good and bad.
Yep.
And, as far as I'm concerned, I'm a poser. If I come up here and I pretend like my life is all sunshine and rainbows, I must tell them everything I've done, how I've gone through it, to show them they can do the same. There's nothing special about me. And, I just want to help.
Yep.
So we will see. Again, my end game is a healing center. So it's happening. It's just a question of when it's going to happen.
No, and that's fantastic. And like you were saying, even, like after you had your first experience, you went back and did a video on Instagram where, you were really raw and vulnerable and open and honest. And you had like 3 people like reach out just, after just like that one post. So, and I think I have like the privilege of speaking to, a lot of current and former first responders on this podcast, and in particular, like a lot of men. And many of you have this unique quality of matching this, how would I say it? Like, I don't like the word alpha because it sounds kind of wankerish, but, like that kind of like that, like intense masculine, like physicality. And like you're saying, if anyone who's like listening to this, like, Mike said, like he's fucking built, he's jacked, he's covered in tats, like, you're not going to like want to come up against him in a dark alley. But you're saying like there's a juxtaposition to someone who traditionally looking like you would be, and in our first responder community, like very stoic and very like, feelings are weak, asking for help is weak, and all of that like fucking archaic nonsense, like you're saying. And then you come out and you have that physicality and that presence about you, and you're like, hey, this is what happened to me, this is what I was feeling, and fucking, you know, laying it all out bare. Not only do people resonate with that level of honesty and, like, you know, authenticity, but like you're saying, I think one of the most important things is like you gives people the permission to go, I can admit it. Like someone who looks like fucking that, who has that presence about them, is saying that he struggled. Like that gives them that unwritten permission to admit that they might be struggling too, and to seek the right kind of help. So I think it's
Actually, it's funny you say that, because I think that's what happened to me when I was watching Eddie Penny video.
mm-hmm.
It kind of gave me the permission as well.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it would have happened had I not watched him.
Yeah.
You know, it's incredible the way that happens. And, you know, to talk, I mentioned Zach before.
Mm-hmm.
The way Zach and I had hooked up was, he did a podcast and, got pretty emotional on it.
Mm-hmm.
Actually very emotional. And it was some stuff about his dad and, his, the things, I'm not speaking out of turn because it's public, but, his dad had a meth addiction and he burned the house down, and, excuse me, the rest of the family hated him.
Mm.
Zach never lost the love for his father, and that blew me away. And I did a reel on it, and he got in touch with me, you know, just gave me gracious comments.
Yeah.
I DM'd him, we went back and forth, and I said, would you be interested in it live? He's like, absolutely. You know, he's like, all I want to do is help.
Yeah.
So there's another guy, hardcore warrior. And what's crazy about him is we're talking about causes of PTSD. His PTSD didn't arise from the SEALs. It arose from all his family trauma.
Yeah.
So that's another example of this guy's a hardened warrior in battle, deployed overseas, and his PTSD has got nothing to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the trauma from what he went through with his family.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, it's an incredible message, and he's such a humble guy. So, you know,
great.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. And
if I could just...
No, yeah, go ahead.
No, please. I just wanted to talk about, you're asking about organizations. Yes. My buddy Wiz Buckley, former F-18 pilot, has an organization called No Fallen Heroes, which is unbelievable work that they're doing. And what they do is they heal first responders and veterans and their family members through psychedelic medications. So,
and they're
if you go to the
501c3, aren't they?
501c3, yep. So you could donate as well. If you go to their website, nofallenheroes.org, you could go on there, fill out an application, and you're expected to provide transportation. They get everything else once you're there, including for your family member.
Yeah.
If you can't do that, you know, they'll work with you as well. And the work that these guys, that Wiz is doing is just phenomenal. I can't even imagine how many lives he's affected. Mm-hmm. And, you know, essentially what to do is, depending on the modality that they're using to heal, they'll fly you out to either Oregon, Colorado, Mexico, or Costa Rica. So there's 4 different modalities, 4 different locations, and it's just mind-boggling the work that he is doing. Yeah. So I want to plug him, and I want to promote his organization as much as possible. If you guys and girls think you need help, psychedelic medication is the way you want to approach it, please go to his organization, fill out the grant request form. They will be in touch with you shortly. And it's a waiting list, but it's really not that long of a wait.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's No Fallen Heroes.
Correct. You can find on Instagram as well, or nofallenheroes.org.
Okay. I will, if you're comfortable and your friend Wiz doesn't mind, I'm happy to like pop the contact details for their website in the show notes for our episode. So if people are interested, they can chase it up. And equally, if someone wants to get in touch with yourself, Mike, what's the best method for them to be able to contact you?
So basically launch everything off there, any announcements I have to make. If anyone needs to DM me, feel free. I'll definitely get back to you.
Yep.
And if you need help, I will do my best to get you there.
Yeah, fantastic. And yeah, and you often sort of seem to like jump on and sometimes with mates, or just kind of one up and like either post videos or do a live, just sort of really getting like the message out there essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I want to show, you know, just there's so many ways that you can get yourself healed. Mm-hmm. You know, small things like you were talking about, structure, gym, eating correctly, just forming good habits along the way. It's not just like this massive thing that's going to come along and help you. A bunch of little things are what's going to help you change your mindset, change your perspective, be grateful for everything you have. If you're going through it, you're in that deep, dark depression, actions, inspired actions form what you do. Now, if you can't do that at the time, then you wake up that morning, you thank, God or whoever your higher power is, universe, you woke up that morning, you're healthy. It's a beautiful day outside. You get to eat breakfast because there are plenty of people in the world that don't have food. Whatever you have, and no matter how bad you think you have it, just think about others who have nothing close to what you have, and go from there. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but these are the things you have to do to change your mindset, your perspective. And if you need help, again, you have to raise your hand because there's no one coming in your house throwing you over the shoulder and going to do it for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, I guess, the final point that I want to add on it too, and, I'm, a bit of a nerd and I'm studying psychology at the moment to become a therapist for first responders. But there
awesome.
is like the science behind like wanting to change behaviors in your life. There is a process. You have to put like implement support structures in place, and there are so many different options, and there's different ways to address it or approach it, and ways to cope and all that kind of thing. So it's not just like, I want to do this, and so then like that's it. You need to really implement like a full structure around it. You have to think about, and many of us as first responders or former military veterans, all that kind of thing, like we know how to think about every kind of contingency when it comes to our jobs. Turn that lens around and think about the contingencies that are going to or like challenges you're going to come up against potentially, and make sure there is a contingency to ensure your success. That's sort of the last little tidbit that I would throw in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, thank you, Mike. This has been such a wonderful conversation. It's been so rewarding and really just, thank you for the opportunity to like expand my knowledge about like plant-based, medicinal options, because was legitimately something I knew nothing about. So it's really, been interesting for me to research and hear your experience on.
Absolutely. My pleasure. I had a great time speaking, Erin.
Thank you. We normally finish the podcast by asking two quick questions. And it's based on the name of the podcast, I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness.
Right.
So the first question that I like to ask is, what do you do to hold space for your darkness, Mike?
Great question. I would say speak to my wife a lot. My wife's the best. And she usually has the answer for everything. And I guess, again, going back to perspective, if I'm going through it, and no matter how good you are at it, every once in a while, you'll kind of get that victim mentality. And I turn around and I literally thank the universe for putting me through it, because I'm going to heal. My mom had just passed. It's family business, but I don't even care. She took me out of the will 3 weeks before she passed. So I was supposed to get about 700,000. I got 25,000. I'm not a bitter dude. It happened. It is what it is. And, it's another thing that I can use to show men and women, like, this happened to me. This is how I handled it. And for whatever reason, the universe is making me pivot. Doesn't want me to have that money. Cool. So, maybe it's keeping me hungry. So, I'm hungry as I'm doing this. I don't know what it is, but it did it for a reason. And I'm not going to be this bitter guy hating everyone about it. Just is what it is.
Yeah. And that's, like you're saying, it is incredible perspective, and being able to pivot is very important.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And the second question that we ask our guests is, what can someone do to be able to support you the best in holding space for that darkness?
What could someone do? I guess the best thing to do is if someone sees me being a little more quiet, introspective. I don't want to say isolating myself, but just maybe not being my usual garrulous self, asking what's going on. You all right, brother? Literally that simple.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that speaks volumes, because sometimes that's all you need. Someone to
Yeah,
ask and someone to care.
absolutely.
All right. All right. Well, again, thank you for your time, Mike. This
Thank
has
you.
been a wonderful experience, and I really look forward to hearing more about it as your journey goes on, and one day, watching you open up your own healing center.
Yes, you'll be invited for the grand opening.
Oh, I would love it. I would absolutely, I really, really adore that. All right.
I promise you it's going to be in a warmer weather place than Boston
Oh,
or
God.
Massachusetts.
Jesus Christ. Please do, mate. Seriously.
That's great.
All right. Thanks again. So this has been another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I've been your host, Erin Jane. And as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Cheers.